It is April 2026, and the Middle East is holding its breath. A fragile 2-week ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran expires this Wednesday. To prevent a return to active fighting, both nations scheduled a critical summit in Islamabad, Pakistan. The United States is sending a delegation led by Vice President J.D. Vance. Across the table from Vance would sit Iran's top negotiator, Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Behind closed doors, these two teams have actually made immense progress. According to leaked intelligence, mediators have already drafted the outlines of a working peace deal to end the war. You would think a drafted agreement means the crisis is over. Instead, the fighting is highly likely to resume. The collapse of this treaty comes down to a specific diplomatic danger known as the Maximalist Trap. Maximalism is a political strategy. A leader publicly demands absolute, unconditional surrender from an opponent, purely to signal strength to domestic voters. But international treaties require compromise. Both sides need a win-win. When one leader loudly demands total submission, the private diplomatic track shatters. Negotiators have already resolved the friction over borders and trade. The true threat to the peace deal is the internal political cost of appearing weak on the world stage. You can see this collision between private peace and public aggression playing out right now in the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Over the weekend, the U.S. military seized an Iranian-flagged vessel, actively enforcing a blockade during a supposed ceasefire. Shortly after the seizure, President Donald Trump went on PBS to discuss the military action. He issued a very specific public ultimatum to Tehran. If the ceasefire expires on Wednesday without a breakthrough on his terms, lots of bombs start going off. Bringing bomb threats and blockades to a peace summit backs your opponent into a corner. It forces the other side to choose between fighting back or signing what looks like a public surrender. Tehran immediately rejected those terms. Iranian officials announced they would absolutely not attend the summit if they were being threatened. Ghalibaf took to social media, warning that if the U.S. wanted a fight, Iran had spent the troops preparing new cards to play on the battlefield. The rapid escalation triggered panic in Islamabad, where Pakistani mediators were formalizing preparations for the talks. They sent an urgent back-channel message to Washington, explicitly warning the administration that their aggressive public rhetoric was tearing the diplomatic progress apart. The mediators laid out a core rule of statecraft. If you want a rival to sign a treaty, you have to let them go home and tell their people they won something. Now, with the Wednesday deadline just hours away, both governments have trapped themselves. The weekend's posturing makes backing down look like a humiliating defeat for either side. This is the reality of the two-front war. A leader fights the foreign adversary at the negotiating table while fighting domestic critics at home. To survive, politicians take hardline public stances that crush the agreements their diplomats just drafted. In modern conflicts, a politician leaning into a microphone to score domestic points often destroys more peace agreements than a battery of artillery. The U.S. team is still scheduled to arrive in Pakistan. The delegation includes key figures like Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, ready to finalize the details. But the question remains whether the empty chairs across from them will ever be filled, or if the recent military posturing will keep the Iranians away entirely. It is a bitter irony. The text of a truce is right there, already outlined on paper. If the summit collapses, the deadline passes. And the immediate alternative is an active resumption of naval warfare and strikes across the Middle East. There is only one way this crisis resolves by Wednesday. The leaders have to step away from the cameras, drop the maximalist demands, and let their diplomats finish the job.